Hi everybody, and welcome to this tutorial on how to sew your reusable face wipes from your kit. Okay, so in their box you get a neat little package, neatly wrapped up. And in it you have a business card, some instructions which give you instructions on washing them, so you want to keep that, 2 piles of fabric pre-cut, and your instructions which have been printed out for you. Okay, so the first thing I would do when I get this is I would read it through. It tells you what you get in the box and what you will need to provide as well. Just read it through, especially if you are not used to sewing, so that you can get an idea of the different steps involved. There's some hints and tips and a template which you can use for future use, or if you have a refill and you need to cut your fabric, because it won't come pre-cut if you buy a refill. Likewise, this is in the back of the PDF download as well. As you can see, it's got 2 little lines here. That's to mark where you start and where you stop sewing for your turning gap. And then a little bit of copyright information at the end, which is important to read as well. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to cut out my template. Whatever you do, if you're cutting paper, do not cut paper with sewing scissors. These are paper scissors. If you cut with your sewing scissors, you will blunt them. So this is a 4-inch square. It has the seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch, roughly between 1 and 1.5 centimeters. It should be marked on your sewing machine. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I'll keep that for later. Okay, so there's my template. Now, the first thing the instructions say is to place your plain coloured fabric and the cotton terry right sides together. So this is your plain fabric. It comes already on top of the cotton terry, in case you didn't know which was which. It is slightly thicker. It's soft, but it's slightly thicker than your organic bamboo terry, which is this. You will notice a difference, okay? So it says to place them right sides together. We do this because we turn them the right way round eventually. You sew them right sides together, so that when you turn them, they will be the right way round. Okay, it's quite tricky to work out which is the right side and which is the wrong side. As my mother would say, no one running for a train will notice. So I use quilter's clips. I always leave the edge that's going to be with the turning gap, I leave it free. That's where I start sewing. So I've got a chalk pen, and I'm just going to lift it up slightly, and I'm going to mark my marks here and here. You don't need to do this. I just thought it might help those who maybe didn't have as much experience in sewing. It's roughly 1 inch. So I will then clip the other 3 sides like so. You can do this with pins. You can even, if you want to go commando, do it without them, because it's not terribly big, but just watch, the fabric will slip slightly. Okay, so that's one of them, and then you carry on and you clip the rest. I do like to batch make, so that's that one. Then you get your pattern fabric and your organic bamboo terry. Okay, and you will see the difference. This is really silky, soft. This is the one that I like to use, taking off eye makeup. Okay, so there we are again. There's my template. You'll also notice that the bamboo terry is the one that sheds a lot. Okay, so you might have to do a bit of hoovering after that, and then we clip it on each side, leaving the edge that's got the turning gap free. There we are. And you'd carry on doing the rest. Okay, now we need to take them over to the sewing machine. So in your instructions it says to thread your sewing machine with white thread for your main thread and white thread in your bobbin. So underneath the sewing machine is where your bobbin lives. In it, it's got white thread because that's underneath your fabric. That's the bottom fabric. And because your bamboo is white, you need white. I always just sew white and white because you're turning it anyway and it saves a lot of jumping between threads. When it comes to top stitching, you can either decide to use the same coloured fabric as your for your top thread as your fabric, or you can just do it contrast in white. You'll see I have my sewing machine set up for a straight stitch. On mine that's A. This is a John Lewis basic machine. I love it, and my stitch length is between 2.5 and 3. So we need to get sewing. So I am going to put my fabric, match it up with the 4/8 of an inch, half an inch, and make sure that the first mark that I made is right underneath my presser foot and where the needle will go in. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle in before I start sewing, and off we go. Okay, and take your time when you get to the end. You can usually guess, okay, when it gets to the corner. Lift your presser foot, turn it round, and you're again on the 4/8 of an inch mark. Off we go. Okay, slow down when we get to the corner. I sometimes hand crank because they're so small, these wipes. Okay, and off we go again. You do not need to go like a racing driver. Okay. There we are. Okay, and sew up to your second mark. I always like to do a little reverse stitch. Out we come. Trim your threads. Your sewing machine might do this. And there we have it. And we do that again. And there we have it. Now we need to go and do something else to them. So what we have to do now is clip our corners, making sure that we don't cut into the stitching we've already done. This helps us to turn it much more easily. Gives a much neater finish. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to turn it. And in order to do that, we open up where our turning gap is and we push through from the other side. And we'll do it with the other one. Okay, and then you get a turning tool. You can use a knitting needle, a chopstick, blunt ballpoint pen, but the trick is to gently push out the corners. Okay, and we'll some of the threads. Okay, and push out the corners till they're nice and square. Let's do this one. Now that they are turned the right way round, I like to give mine a little iron, a little press before we top stitch. Just make sure that you have put all the raw edges from the turning gap on the inside. Now we need to top stitch to close the turning gap and give it that neat finish. It makes them much more secure. You'll see that for my top thread I've changed it to a colour that matches. You don't have to do this, you can, if you like, do a completely contrast colour. So I like to start on the side that's next to the turning gap. Okay, so I'll start about halfway up, roughly about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Place my needle in and off we go. When you get to the corner, it will be thicker, so you might need to hand crank it. And slightly lift. You might need to slightly lift the presser foot as you go through to get it over the corner. You should always lift your presser foot with the needle in your fabric so that you don't lose it. Okay, and I've met the start of the sewing, so I'll just do a little back stitch. And then trim your threads. And there you have it. Just change my thread